Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Manor Podcast. Once again, I am your co-host, Roger Bodee, and joined, as always, by my best friend and other co-host, Michael Hamilton. How are you doing today, Michael?
Doing pretty good. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm just peachy keen. So today's cast is going to be what Michael and I think are the 10 best Flesh and Blood cards that have ever been printed so far. We are not including Uprising spoilers, since that set obviously has not fully come out and launched. But anything else is on the table. But I guess just to clear things up a little bit. So when you were evaluating cards, Michael, did you consider them in the context of the decks that they're played or just their power level in a vacuum?
I try to do their power level in a vacuum. I think that's kind of harder to get correct, but I felt like that was more useful. How about you?
I did the same thing because, obviously Sonata Arcanix would be, I think, one of the most powerful cards in the game. Just absolutely when it's combined with Scaletta. But just like in and of itself, it's a perfectly fair and reasonable card and not one of the best cards in the game, in my opinion. Spoilers.
I agree. That one actually was on my honorable mention list for having powerful interactions, but by itself it is not a particularly impressive card.
Right. So how this is going to work is Michael's going to start off with what he thinks is the 10th most powerful card, and if his 10th most powerful card is on my list, I'll say what number I think it is, and we'll discuss it from there, and then I'll say what my 10th would be, and then we'll go up all the way up until we both discuss our number one most powerful card.
Sounds good. Are you ready to start?
Oh, I'm ready.
Sure. Okay. So first we'll start with my honorable mention, which is a very powerful card. It's seen play in the one deck it is allowed to see play in, and it just fills a lot of roles. My honorable mention is Become the Arknight.
Okay, that's an interesting honorable mention. Especially considering there are probably more powerful cards in the Rune Chant Viserai builds. So what made that card in particular your honorable mention?
So specifically, it is a blue card that blocks for 3 and can fix basically any hand. I place a lot of value on making your deck more consistent. As you'll see as I get up my list, there's a lot of cards that are just very good for consistency on it. And the ceiling on this card is not the highest, but the floor on it is extremely high. And that's why it got my honorable mention. It can fix just about any hand.
That makes sense. It was a card that I looked at, but ultimately, having played a lot of Viserai, it was always solid, but it was never like, oh man, we're going off with Become the Arknight. I guess getting a Mordred Tide when you're doing it is a pretty high ceiling when you're doing it, but then I would just go with Mordred Tide at that point because it's not the Become the Arknight that's necessarily, causing me to go off or have an extreme value turn. It's whatever I'm getting. So, but I definitely see where you're coming from on it.
Yeah, I didn't put Mordred Tide specifically because Mordred Tide relies so heavily on Viserai's hero power to be a good card, whereas Become the Arknight, I expect to see play in basically any time the hero's tag is Viserai.
That makes sense. My honorable mention was Exude Confidence. While this card hasn't seen a ton of play so far, I just believe this card is extremely powerful. It just hasn't found quite the right home yet. And as Flesh and Blood grows and develops, and there are more and more unique instant effects that we're seeing. For instance, when this card was first printed, Blink and Blizzard didn't even exist yet, and they're two of the most powerful instants that can happen now. I guess not Blink, but Blizzard specifically, that can happen to blow you out in your combat step, and Exude Confidence just shuts that down outright, which is an extremely powerful effect, as well as also turning off all defense reactions while it's not blocked by something with higher power. So as the game progresses further and further, I think this card's power level will just continue to become more apparent as aggressive decks are looking to prevent their opponents from disrupting them from being aggressive. So that's why it made my honorable mention.
That makes sense. That is a good one that did not make my list.
Yeah. So what was your 10th most powerful card in Flesh and Blood, Michael?
This card is very overrated. It is a good card. It made my top 10 list. It is a very unique effect in that it also shuts off defense reactions similar to Exude Confidence, and it gives classes access to a very powerful disruptive on hit that normally do not have access to it. So my number 10 is Command and Conquer.
Command and Conquer at number 10. That's interesting. Command and Conquer was my 8th most powerful card, just because in its absolute state, you're always getting 2 cards from your opponent when they have an arsenal. So it's always going to be a 2-for-1, because either they need to expend 2 cards blocking it, at least, or a card and equipment, which is also a valuable resource for them, or they're giving up their arsenal card. It can generate both value in just raw resources and tempo, which is a very powerful effect. But ultimately, there's going to be, times where your opponent doesn't have an arsenal and you draw this card, or obviously it's a red, so you're not going you need resources. You're not going to get them with this card, or there's just more powerful overall synergies in Flesh and Blood now than when this card was first printed, where cards kind of relied on just their raw stats a lot more. But as time goes on and there's more and more unique effects that synergize more cohesively and overall give you more power level than this one card is just presenting at rate, I think this card will continue to fall off a little bit over time, but as of right now, it is absolutely still one of the 10 most powerful cards printed.
So what did you put for number 10?
I put the Great Library of Solana, just because when this card is really going off, it really enables Prism to shine in a way that no other card really does. Being able to draw the 5 cards a turn just closes so many doors and opportunities for opponents who are trying to play long, grindy attrition games against Prism, and is specifically also very hard to interact with, given that your opponent who is trying to play these long, grindy games with you is not likely to also have 2 yellows in order to destroy it, or Corsham, which is a little known fact for it. But just because of the raw resources it just provides for you in the long game and inevitability, I'd put it as my number 10th most powerful card.
Okay. That card did not make my list. I think it's interesting to me that it would... I honestly don't think that card gets there on power level, but maybe that is contextual because our formats have been typically pretty fast and they haven't been slow, so we haven't really seen the format where it would shine. But I think a lot of Prisms have excluded that card from their list, and I have not seen it in a Bolton deck yet, and when those are the only 2 characters that are able to play the card, I would expect them to play it more often to be a top 10 card.
Yeah, for what it's worth, this was the card I felt I was reaching with a little bit the most on my list, but overall, just from my experience playing with and against it, it's just been very dominating in the games that I've seen it in.
Okay, moving on to number 9. My 9th most powerful card is Channel Lake Frigid. I think this is another card that is probably overrated, but still, it's an extremely powerful card. I expect every ice hero, or every hero that is playing ice cards, to put this card in their deck. It is the strongest of the ice cards. It blocks for 3. It's a blue, and it has a very impactful effect on the game when you do play it. It checks all the boxes to be one of the most powerful blues in the game.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's why I put it as my 3rd most powerful card in the game. So I feel a little called out saying that it's overrated, given that I've rated it so highly and so much over you at the moment, but I'll let it slide. I just think that there are so many game states where this card just hits the battlefield, and every time your opponent just goes, oh, like they just look at their hand, they have to redo all the math on, their sequencing and their pitching and what their actual values that they're going to be getting out of their cards for their next turn, at least. And if it sticks around for more than one turn, it can just be a huge tempo swing in your favor for the game. And I think it's really shown, how it can be powerful in both aggressive strategies in Starvo, as well and Ice Lexi, for what it's worth, and controlling Starvos in Oldhim. So given that it's just, versatile in both archetypes and just how disruptive it really can be in a game, is why I rated it so highly.
That makes sense. I think it's easy to overlook the cost of the 2 resources in a card that is not dealing any damage. And if you aren't combining it with either evasion, like Dominate, or another way to prevent your opponent from just blocking with their hand, it can be hard to get that full value out of it, in my opinion.
Right, but it's like, so in just evaluating the resources like that, so are you really unhappy to, be playing a turn timber because you're giving up 2 resources and 2 cards in order to mitigate 6 damage? You're not dealing any damage. You're not getting anything out of it other than the 6 block value. Where if you just had 2 3 blocks, you're getting the same value out of a turn timber.
Well, if you're playing red turn timber unfused, I'm usually pretty unhappy with that because a card and 2 resources for 6 value isn't particularly great. You're looking to get the 8 out of it, and that's why we play turn timber, is we're looking to get that fuse off of it and spend 1 card and 2 resources to prevent 8 damage, which is quite a good deal. And it's hard to imagine a channel like Frigid preventing more than 8 damage.
I think there's definitely worlds where it can, in Chain specifically, or the decks that really want to go wide, specifically, any Runeblade where they're trying to play 4, 5, 6, sometimes, against Viserai. When I was playing combo Runeblade Viserai, I just couldn't go off effectively against channel like Frigid. So in those circumstances, it was preventing my opponent from just outright losing the game. So the more cards that are taxed by its effect, the higher its upside is. Obviously, it's very low and it's not very impactful when your opponent, is trying to just play 1 big card a turn, or playing a more mid-range style of deck, like something like a Dorinthia or something like that. They have a lot of blues, but they're not trying to go super wide at the same time. They're trying to go more tall, just playing off of 2 or 3 cards. That's obviously when it's at its worst. But when your opponent is trying to go wide, and all the aggressive decks so far in Flesh and Blood, aside from Stargo, do go extremely wide, and that's why its value is so high for me, just in the ability to steal back that tempo from the aggressive decks.
Okay. I do agree it has points where it's very good. That's also why it made my list. Its floor being an ice blue block 3 is still extremely good.
For sure.
So what did you put at number 9?
I put Toma Feindal.
Oh, that is a good one.
Being able to always just draw 2 cards for 1 resources on top of the life you're gaining is just a tremendous tempo swing in and of itself when it's, doing its thing. And aside from, like I said at the start of the cast, evaluating its power level just in a vacuum, when you're playing this card, you're also going to be able to significantly mitigate the fact that you're not getting that action point back, whether you are, a wizard being able to play it at instant speed, or Runeblades now being able to play it off of Spellbound Creepers. I think the card will also continue to get better and better over time, much like I said with Exude Confidence. But I think already, given that it's been such a staple, especially in Kano deck specifically, as we saw recently, it's just an effect and a card that's going to continue to be a very powerful effect in Flesh and Blood.
Yep, I agree with those things. Toma Feindal was a card that, it was one of my last cuts from my list. I think on raw power level, it is very high. The cost of 1 resource, 1 action point, and 1 card to draw 2 cards and gain 4 to 5 life. That's a very powerful card there.
The life gain is really what puts it over the top, just in like swinging the tempo, absolutely.
And I think I agree with you that it is a card that will likely keep on getting better as it finds more ways to mitigate that cost of an action point, or as the format gets more ways to mitigate that cost. This is a card that will always be sneaking into deck lists, and yeah, it's a good card.
Unlike Great Library of Solana, at least I have 1 card on my list so far you're agreeing with. 2 actually if I Command and Conquer. 3 if we count Channel like Frigid. Okay, never mind. I'll take it back.
Yeah, the hard Channel like Frigids are very often where we put them. Okay, moving on to number 8. I have Endless Arrow.
Sorry, that did not make my list.
Okay, this is a card that has a very powerful on hit. You are essentially putting this card back in your hand. It's a 4 for 0, which, as we've seen with Snatch, is plenty good enough to see play. It blocks for 3, and it is one of the most threatening on hits out of the Lexi deck right now. And I expect if we see any other go wide rangers, this card will be in their decks as well, and for as long as it can be.
That's interesting to me. I thought about putting this card on my list. I obviously, looked at it, said, oh yeah, that's an Endless Arrow, but moved on. The reason why I didn't ultimately is because on rate a little bit, it's not the best, because it's always just drawing you another Endless Arrow when it hits. So let's say you need to try to hit like a blue or a different kind of like effect, like a non-attack action, it's just worse than a Snatch at that point. And it's really only shining when you have Voltaire, to get your action point back, get the go again on it repeatedly to really threaten using it multiple times in one turn. My opponent just attacks me with an endless arrow and they're playing a dread boar, for example. I'm like, okay, you deal 4 damage, draw your endless arrow, move on. But it's really just in the context of both the ice arrows generally that it's paired with that also punish all of your attacks for the rest of the turn, with either forcing your card to pay resources to prevent the discard, or generating a frostbite or things like that really are what make endless arrows shine, or something like rain razors or art of war, that pushing its power up higher than just the 0 for 4. But I do agree with you that its effect and its ability to be recursive is definitely very powerful.
Yeah, I think it's significantly better than Snatch because it blocks for 3, and I think in general drawing a 0 for 4 off your 0 for 4 is usually going to be better than drawing a random card from your deck.
You do love 3 blocks. If there's anything I know about Michael Hamilton, is that he loves 3 blocks.
So what did you put for number 7?
Yeah, because my 8 was Command and Conquer, so we'll move on to my number 7, which is kind of fitting. Speaking of Ranger cards, I put 3 of a kind, just because drawing 3 cards and just being able to mitigate the turns where Ranger really doesn't want to block a lot of the time. So when you do have to block with 1 or 2 cards, keeping just like a blue and a 3 of a kind to just refill your hand to try to once again press that tempo is very powerful effect. As well as, when you're already ahead on tempo, it just gives you so many more resources to start working with and really start punishing your opponent in order to get even further ahead. So that's why I have it so highly.
Okay. 3 of a Kind's not a card that made my list. I think it is a good card, and
you draw 3 cards, Michael.
You do draw 3 cards, but its drawback is
3.
Extremely expensive. The not being able to play cards from your hand really limits its potential uses. It basically requires you to either reload or have Voltaire's currently works well with it. But outside of Voltaire, I don't think the card is particularly powerful. So
okay, so you don't think 3 of a Kind's powerful without Voltaire, and I don't think Endless Arrow is powerful without Voltaire. So
Voltaire's doing some heavy lifting for these Rangers.
It's a pretty strong piece of equipment, it turns out. So what was your 7th most powerful card, Michael?
My 7th most powerful card is Belittle. This card just gets there very easily on rate. The cost of 1 resource and 1 card for your choice of 6 damage or 3 damage and 3 resources back is just an extremely good deal that you are always happy to play. The condition of having a 3 power attack is real, and it is a real drawback to the card, and the card only blocks for 2 as well. But I think the power level of just having a 1 cost 6 power or essentially -2 cost 3 power, both of those are quite good, and that's why Belittle is my 7th rated card.
I just disagree that this card's powerful in a vacuum, because in a vacuum this card's horrible. It's just a 1 for 3 go again. It blocks for 2. It blocks for 2, Michael. I can't believe you have a card that blocks for 2 on your list.
If you say in a vacuum and then you just ignore half the text on the card because half of the text is contextual on the other cards, that's not really giving the card a fair shot.
I suppose. I thought about Belittle Minnowism, but I just thought, well, without Minnowism, it's just a terrible card. So I kept it off. So that was the end of my thought process on it. But I do agree that, I was really low on Belittle Minnowism for a long time. I just didn't think it was really worth putting in a lot of lists. Mm-hmm. And I still really don't think, outside of Chain, it's particularly powerful. So it's interesting that it's on your list also for that reason as well, because it's not like it's been a staple in every aggressive deck that we've seen so far. It's really only powerful in the Chain lists because they play so many cards that have 3 or less power but get pumped through other ways. For example, like Briar, before she was banned, would never play Belittle Minnowism because all of her attacks just had 4+ power naturally. So she just had no room for these 2 cards because that 3 power restriction is so high. Mm-hmm. So I guess that's the other kind of pushback I would put onto it. But I'm still going to stick with Belittle sucks because without Minnowism, it's nothing. So.
Sure. I think I think it is fair to evaluate them with the context that the other one exists, because its name is specifically written on the card.
It doesn't even count in Chain either, because you're always just going to banish all your Minnowisms. I've seen it. You just flip over Minnowism on your first banish, and then you flip over 2 more Minnowisms on your second banish, and then you're just out of Minnowisms, and you're like, oh no. Now I'm just playing all these crappy 3-power go-again attacks that only block for 2. What do I do?
I also think Belittle only belongs in decks that want to play 3-power attacks anyway. For whatever reason, they have attacks that basically meet its condition. It doesn't like it does have a pretty deck warping requirement, but the power level is high enough that if it's when you can make that work, the card is very good and a strong reason to do so.
Okay, I'm not going to belittle your pick anymore, so we can move on.
Okay. Do you want to go to your number 6?
Yeah, my number 6 was Art of War. Just the inherent flexibility of the card in both fixing your hand. I guess if you don't have an attack action to draw the 2, that doesn't necessarily do that. But in the decks that are playing Art of War, you generally are playing a higher degree of attack actions in order to satisfy its clause to filter your hand a little bit, as well as naturally being able to pump all of your attacks for the turn if you're playing it in a go wide deck, but also give an extra source of go again to also enable that going wide strategy. So it kind of helps you out and fixes a lot of things in both of those aspects, as well as having the secret mode of being super good in Lexi, where you play it and you can block with the 2 cards in your arsenal to blow out your opponent's fused Oganol. So those are all the reasons, mostly the first thing, not so much the arsenal block, but why I put it on 6 on my list.
Yeah, I think 6 is a great spot to put Art of War, because Art of War is also my 6th most rated, or 6th best card.
Wow. I wish I had the soundboards. Wow.
Just to continue off of that, I think on rate, the +1 power banish draw 2, you're spending 2 cards, the Art of War and the card you banish, and 1 resource to get 2 cards back and get +1 damage on every attack you play the rest of this turn. If you play 3 or 4 attacks this turn, that's just spending 1 resource and you're going even on cards to get 3 or 4 damage, which is an extremely good rate. It also functioning as a source of go again when you need it is quite nice, and even the increasing the power of cards you're blocking from comes up sometimes and is good. If you look at it in decks like Oldheim, they have played it on defense when they can spend, since it's a deck that can spend its resources pretty well on the opponent's turn, you can spend 1 resource on Art of War, spend 1 on Rampart, 1 on Crown of Seeds, and it even functions on defense. It's just a card that is powerful in a lot of spots, and that's why I think it deserves its spot at number 6.
I'm glad we agree. I'm glad we can finally agree on something around here, Michael. I was getting worried. So,
okay.
What was your 5th most powerful card then?
My 5th most powerful card is Miraging Metamorph. This is a card that is significantly above rate and doesn't really have a downside. I guess it requires you to have an aura in play or a good aura, and part of its power is because Prism has these auras that you can flash in at instant speed, so the threat of them popping it and you putting down a powerful yellow aura in response to or before the trigger resolves is part of why this card is so threatening. But just a 1 for 7 is such a good rate that I think you can't really ignore it. And assuming you can keep auras on the field, that's basically what this card is. It's a 1 for 7 that's actually even harder to block, because the decks that have 6 power attacks really can't use those to block it.
That's interesting. Yeah, I don't have this card on my list. This and, spoiler, Mauvrin Skies were the last 2 cards I cut from my most powerful cards. My reason for cutting it was that ultimately, if you're... I think down the line, post-Prism, especially without Luminaris, this card's value is going to plummet dramatically, because it's not just the 1 for 7, because 1 for 7 no on hits is good. It's good rate, but it's not insane. But it's specifically the threat of, being popped and then Prism being so easily to threaten to flash in one of her many powerful light illusionist auras, because the 3-cost auras, or the blue auras from Everfest, don't have that tricky ability to be flashed in at instant speed. And then as well as if whatever other illusionist weapons come down the line after Luminaris that might not give it the go again as easily or as efficiently that it does at the moment, I think would also really hinder this card's impact in deck lists. So that's ultimately why I cut it. But I do agree overall that it is an insanely powerful card, and 1 for 7 is just a lot of damage still.
Yeah, I expect probably no matter what the next illusionist looks like, I think this card will probably find a home in the deck, but it might not be the great card it is currently in Prism. It might be worse in the deck. I think just on rate, this card is so good that it would be hard to imagine the deck not including it, but I do agree that part of its power is definitely the combination of Luminaris and the yellow auras that are instants, making it the threat is there even when you don't have the aura currently in play.
Moving on to my 5th most powerful card, I have Enlightened Strike.
Ooh.
So Enlightened Strike is just a hyper efficient card ultimately that it's just very flexible by its nature, given that it has so many modes on it. If you want to really push the damage, you can opt to do that. If you need a little bit of card filtering, obviously it does that as well. And if you just need a good way to just get an efficient go again attack, it does that as well. So given that it does all 3 of those abilities, as well as being able to fix certain hands when you're, flooding on all red hands, for example, or just not really having quite the level of cohesion that you need, being able to block with 2 cards or 1 or 2 cards, keep this attack for either 7 or 5, and then still always maintain that arsenal card as well, is just very good value. And Michael, you were actually the person in your Orlando Oldhim list that really showed me the true just power of Enlightened Strike, because I would have never really thought to put it in a deck like Oldhim until that innovation was shown. So kudos to you for really opening my eyes to just how powerful this card is. So I hope it's somewhere on your list.
It is. It is number 3 on my list. I agree with everything you said. Being able to fix all red hands is something that I think is very valuable. Coming in with the +2 mode, it is Raging Onslaught, which isn't very good, but that's a pretty good floor when you can use a red card to pay for your Raging Onslaught. Right. And then
because then it's a Miraging Metamorph.
The Go Again mode can allow no. Miraging Metamorph costs 1. Well, sure, I get it. Okay. But that being a card's floor of being able to use any red to come in for 7 damage, or any card to be able to come in for 7 damage, that's just extremely good. The draw a card mode at 0 for 5, you're spending an action point and 1 card. Well, an action point and 2 cards to get 1 card back and come in for 5. That's also just a really good rate because you're essentially trading a card and an action point for 5 damage, which not a lot of cards can do that. So that's a very impressive rate. And then the Go Again also fixes very, like, if you just get to your turn with a bunch of cards and you just need to spend your cards, the Go Again mode is, well, it's not particularly efficient at spending 2 cards for 5 Go Again. It is a very nice third option to have on the card. And it definitely has its spots where that mode, you're happy that that mode's there. So the flexibility and even the raw power on specific modes of this card is why I think it is one of the best, the third best card in the game, and we'll see play for a long time.
It's not the third best card in the game when my third best card in the game, Channel Lake Frigid, because when you have to pay a resource and put a card for you, this card is atrocious. So clearly Channel Lake Frigid is a more powerful card than Enlightened Strike. So moving on, what is your fourth most powerful card, Michael?
My number 4 is Sink Below. It is a very powerful card in that it is, you spend 0 resources and no action point for essentially 4 damage, which is a pretty good rate comparable to a lot of the cards or just a lot of what Earth or old Lightning Briar was trying to do, a bunch of 0 for 4s with Go Again. Sink Below is just, that's a good rate. It also gives you this card filtering where you can improve hands that are not great by tucking the worst card or the card that is.
It's always a feel bad when your opponent goes, no draw for the sink. You're like, you don't need a sink, and they're like, no, my hand's already the nuts. I just want to block for it. It's like, oh no.
It also lines up really well against combat tricks. Pummel is a card that I considered for my list, and spoilers did not make it. Partly because if they ever have the Sink Below when you pummel something, it feels like you just lost the game. It just it just covering those combat tricks very well, and on top of just being above rate by itself and offering this filter, Sink Below is just a very powerful card.
I agree that Sink Below is a very powerful card. In fact, I put it as the most powerful card in Flesh and Blood. It is actually my number 1 spot.
Wow.
And that's because it's just so ubiquitous in decks. You think that even in combo Viscerai, you would think Reduce to Rune Chant would be, if I was trying to play a more defensive option, would be where I would want to go. But even just being able to filter out your hands when you're trying to set up the combo with Sync's ability actually pushed it over in my builds of the list over Reduced to Enchant. And when it's played, it's always 3 red Sync blows. Every deck, almost every deck in the game starts at 3 red Sync blows when I'm building it, just because the effect and rate and flexibility of the card is just so high. And even setting it up for second cycle things, if you're drawing it early and you don't necessarily want its effect yet, in the late game where you're just in that really just like slugging it out back and forth situations with your opponent, Sync Below being able to both, get you 1 card deeper into your cycle, as well as, be an effective way to cover up that dominate attack that you don't have the equipment for anymore, or cover up the 4 power ubiquitous attacks that have some of those really devastating on hits. That's why ultimately I felt that it was the most powerful card, just because of its sheer ubiquity in Flesh and Blood and how much of a cornerstone I think it is of the actual like gameplay and mechanics when playing. So that's why I put it at number 1.
Yeah, that all makes sense. It's a very powerful card. It will see play probably forever.
Probably forever. Until they print Super Sync Below, where you get to draw 2 cards.
I actually had it at my number 2 and ended up moving it down just before we started. So I agree. It's very good.
Well, you won't believe what my number 2 card is, but first we have to talk about what my number 4 card is, and it's Oakenold. Oakenold, I think, has just shown to be just a stupid card when it's fused. The fact that the discard happens off of just a single point of damage, I guess it's not truly discard, but putting 2 random cards at the bottom of your opponent's deck for just getting across, just sneaking that 1 point of damage across the finish line with its dominate ability is game breaking. It's just devastating. I think if the effect wasn't random, this card wouldn't even be on my list. But the fact that the effect just completely devastates your opponent's ability to effectively try to, keep hands that function at times, where a lot of the time, especially against Starbo, the correct line that I wouldn't say correct, but a line that I took was, just take the Oakenold, cross your fingers, hope that you keep one of the couple cards that you want in your hand. And if you don't, you just don't have a functional turn and you just lose the game. So just being a card that effectively says 9 power attack, win the game when it's fused and hits, I think is insanely powerful, and that's why I have it so high.
Yep. Oakenold was my number 2. It was number 3, and then I bumped it up above Sync Below at the end. I agree with everything you said, except for the part where you said if it was not random, it would not be on your list. I think this card's ceiling of 3 resources for 9 damage with Dominate, and also get rid of 2 of your opponent's cards, that is so far above rate that even if they got to choose what cards they would put on the bottom, it would still easily make my top 10 list. It might lose a couple slots, maybe Sync Below and Enlightened Strike would beat it out, but I think the sheer power level of 3 resources for 9 damage and getting 2 of their cards is just insanely high. On top of that, the Dominate ability, making it so that they can't even block it out. It just is a really, really powerful card.
Maybe my bias for just how much I hate random discard. ILSS, never put random discard in this game ever again. Never, just don't do it. It's horrendous. It's just such a bad mechanic that it's just not needed in the game. It's just insane to me that the Crippling Crush and Oakenold are random, given how punishing they are, and I can't think of any other random discard effects in the game, bar none. So not only are these just huge, powerful attacks that are already super punishing, adding just the extra layer of screw you with the random discard, so you don't even get to effectively even hope to have a functional turn. Sometimes it just tilts me. So it probably would still be good on my top 10. I just really hate random discard, Michael. I really hate it.
I understand. So moving on, we have your number 2 and my number 1 as the only cards we haven't talked about yet.
So I'll go with my number 2. It's Plunder Run. I imagine this is your number 1.
It is, yes.
So Plunder Run is so good that it was banned because it was just 9 copies in every aggressive deck. I still put Sync Below over it because it still goes in every defensive and mid-range game of the deck, where I think Plunder Run is basically specifically limited to the go wide aggressive decks was really where it shines. But I think as we saw, in Briar and Old Chain as well, the ability to be the pump and have the static ability to always threaten to draw a card if any one of your attacks hits on the turn was just way too good and needed to go. So
yeah, Plunder Run gives you the ability to like play these 5-card hands that basically turn into 6-card hands, because you're still getting you get the 3 damage specifically off Red Plunder Run, no matter
from Arsenal.
Yeah, sorry. If you play it from Arsenal, no matter if they block out or not, you're still getting that 3 damage worth of value because they have to block it out. And there are a lot of decks that are not really equipped to block out 5-card hands, and the fact that if any card leaks through, they get that card to replace the Plunder Run. It's just so powerful.
Yeah, agreed. I think there's no denying that it just is just a beating of a card, and really just dominated the entire season that it was legal for with Briar. So I don't fault you at all for putting number 1. It was my number 1 card for a while, but then a little part of me was like, I don't want to have the same number 1 card as Michael. I gotta put some spin on my list, and I'm gonna go with my slightly hot take of putting Sink Below number 1. So I could definitely see a world where I should have put Plunder Run number 1. Plunder Run number 1. That's a fun little tongue twister. But ultimately, I put Sink Below just because it's not getting banned anytime soon, despite its power level. And it's the type of power level and card in the game that I think promotes healthy, fun, good games of Flesh and Blood. Moving on, though, I think it'd be a good, thing to talk about. There are some notable exceptions that aren't on either of our lists that are banned in Flesh and Blood right now. And I'm sure a lot of listeners right now are saying, Roger, Michael, you guys are crazy. These cards are banned. How are they not in the 10 most powerful cards in Flesh and Blood? Shouldn't every single one of these be on your list, or at least as well as the suspended list? Have you even read Autumn's Touch? That card's clearly one of the most powerful cards ever printed. Well, it's just a little bit more contextual than that, and some of the bans also, I think, were a little bit relic of their times, but we can start going down the list and talk about why they didn't make our list now. So yeah. What is the first card on the ban and restricted list you want to talk about, Michael?
Well, since you already touched on it, let's talk about Autumn's Touch, which is basically only banned because it basically died for Starvo's sins, right? Starvo, it was too strong, and they're like, what is the best consistency nerf we can give it?
And it wasn't really even a consistency nerf, because they just had to play, it just was a defensive nerf. They just said, well, let's make aggressive decks a touch better into Starvo in order to race him a little bit more effectively. And that's basically what we saw at the Pro Tour, was that a lot of people were playing Chain because they felt with Husk they were able to effectively race Starvo now that he just can't block or have the same level of defensive options that he used to have. So there wasn't necessarily anything about Autumn's Touch that was, inherently powerful or broken. It was just trying to make Starvo slightly worse at blocking, which is even questionable if he'd even accomplish that goal in the long run anyways. So
that's fair. Okay. While we're talking about Starvo, how about Awakening is another card? This one's on the ban list, and it did not make either of our lists. It's one that I strongly considered, but ended up deciding not to put it on there. What are your thoughts on Awakening?
Well, for everybody out there, Michael and I have been anti-Awakening since it was printed. We have basically never thought this card was particularly powerful or worth including. So much so that, I guess, a little behind the scenes, a lot of people gave credit for Michael, I'm going to out you here, for just saying like, oh, I don't have to play Awakening because people will think I'm playing Awakening and play around it, and I'll get equity off of that. Michael just doesn't like Awakening. I don't like Awakening either. It's just, well, a card that doesn't block and has no text when you're ahead is just not, like, that floor is just so bad. And there are situations where that card will literally cost you the game, where it could have just been any other card that blocked or did anything, instead of just being a blue with no text when you're ahead. And when you're behind, it really isn't even Awakening's power level in and of itself that was egregious. It was really just, as we saw with Everfest, it was Awakening it to Pulverize, just this huge, massive attack that was printed that kind of really punished your opponent and created this damage swing. I think those two reasons are ultimately why they didn't make my list, but I'm happy to hear yours, Michael.
Yeah, I agree with the Pulverize thing a lot. I think Awakening was basically unplayable in Oldhim until Pulverize came out. And Pulverize with Awakening, that combination of spending essentially 2 resources in a card for 14 damage and that threatening on hit, that was a pretty powerful combination when you got it off. But I think outside of Pulverize, the card just like wasn't good enough in my opinion. And specifically, we talked about rating these cards in a vacuum. And if the card wasn't good enough until it got this extremely specific support card for it, I think that's enough to leave it off the list in my opinion.
Right. What's the next card?
Ball Lightning.
Oh, I looked at this card for a hot minute and I was like, I still can't believe this card's banned at times.
Why is that?
It doesn't block. You can't block with it. You just can't. If you want to live with cards in your hand that could block in order to not die, this card does not help you not die. And if there's anything we love here at the Manor Podcast, it's blocking. So that's why it didn't make my list. And ultimately, its effect isn't even inherently that powerful. It needs to be played with a lot of other sources of lightning or elemental cards to be truly maximized, as well as going wide. So banning this card was just really weird to me, and I think it would have been a better way to go to just nerf or errata Briar herself first and then evaluate if anything else needed to be changed, as opposed to nuking Lightning Lexi as well as over nerfing Briar to the point where she hadn't really been competitive a lot until they had to, pseudo nerf Starvo. And even then, she's not doing anything stellar. She's just kind of like hanging out, being a solid tier 2 deck.
So my opinion on Ball Lightning, I think it blocking for 0 is relevant, but it's okay if a card blocks 0 if it's extremely powerful. Like Art of War doesn't block, kind of, and it still made both of our lists. But part of the problem with Ball Lightning also is that it's not even that powerful for not blocking. 0 for 3 go again is not a good deal on your red, and it's on hit that it...
Could you imagine being 1 for 3 go again? That's a horrible deal on your red, and it only blocks for 2 at that point.
You get 1 for 6, or you get -2 for 3 with Belittle, assuming that is what you were referring to.
Wink, wink.
But Ball Lightning, especially against the decks that are defensive anyway, you're attacking for 3 damage with a card that just trades for a 3 block. That's like it's fine, but on a card that has a lot of downside, like not being able to block, it's not particularly great in my opinion. And I think I agree with everything you said about Briar, that she has been solidly tier 2 since, well, she wasn't even tier 2 right after her nerfs, and then once Viscera and Starvo both got hit, then Briar rose to tier 2 in my opinion. And I don't think taking away Ball Lightning was necessary. I don't think Lightning Lexi or Briar would be problematic with that card.
Yeah, Lightning Lexi just can't really exist in a functional way at the moment. It can. I know you were toying around with it for a little bit at the Pro Tour, but I think without Ball Lightning, you're just ultimately just playing just a really wide Lexi deck that sometimes has lightning cards in it, as opposed to Ball Lightning would enable a true lightning strategy out of Lexi and allow her to play her lightning fuse arrows with more consistency and better enable them. But without it, Lightning Lexi kind of just has to play with what she's given and just kind of rely on the inherent power level of Voltaire to a lot of her deck's strategy.
Yeah, the deck that really misses having Ball Lightning the most, in my opinion, is Death Dealer Lightning Lexi, where you have all these snapshots, and your goal is to make a really long snapshot chain. And having Ball Lightning on those snapshot turns would be a huge boon to the deck. But
that makes sense. Yeah, I always forget about snapshot, but yeah, that definitely makes a lot of sense. What's the next card on our banned and restricted list or suspended list? Sorry.
So the last ban card that we're going to talk about, because Duskblade's an equipment, so we won't talk about that, is Drone of Brutality.
It blocks for 2. Do we need to say anything more?
It does.
Blocks for 2.
Block for 2, and the aggressive decks in the format have gotten so much stronger over the last year or so since.
It's just not uncommon at all to just never see your second cycle against these aggressive decks now. It was banned pre-Monarch, right? So Chain wasn't even in the format. So the most aggressive deck was like Katsu.
Dash, I think, might be there too.
Sure. Sasha and Brendan got it banned, I believe, with their control Katsu decks, where they just blocked with flick flack combo cards and just eventually ran into this inevitability because decks just couldn't push past their blocking capabilities despite it only having 2 block, where that's just not the case anymore today. I think I don't even think Oldheim would play this card anymore. That might be a little bit of a hot take, but it's not synergizing with anything that defensive decks want to do anymore. So it doesn't have a talent, obviously. So you're never going to fuse with this card or have it raise the overall synergy in your decks. So it's not doing that. And it's just not an effectively powerful effect anymore, especially given that we have cards that also kind of pseudo loop now if we wanted them to. If recursive cards really were like truly an issue, I think we would have saw that in Evergreen, because it has the same pseudo effect where you can loop it if you play it from Arsenal. And if that was something that like these control decks were really looking to do to, really, push damage or be recursive, I think we would see Evergreen being more of a problem, but I could be wrong on that.
Yeah, I do think Evergreen's recursiveness was specifically powerful in the Starvo list, where it was easy to, if you triggered the Starvo and played the Evergreen from Arsenal, then you had a nice Starvo Evergreen on your second cycle. But again, not a problematic card by any means. And I think that if Drone of Brutality was not banned, it likely wouldn't see any play or change the metagame at all currently.
Would you play it? If this card came off the ban list today, what deck would even theoretically want to play it?
I can't imagine a deck that currently would want this card. Something would have to change significantly in the format for this card to see play.
Yeah, because I think it bears repeating. This card was banned before talents existed. So I guess not even before before talents were even a thing. So
game's changed a lot since then, huh?
Turns out it has.
So I said the last banned card. I almost skipped our last suspended card that we're going to talk about. So Seeds of Agony also did not make either of our lists. Why did Seeds of Agony not make your list?
I remember sleeving up Seeds of Agony after Oldheim came out into we were just kind of kitchen table playing, and like the games were close, but like it's not like Chain just ran away with it. And I think given, especially with Icelander coming out in the near future, the more disruptive elements of Flesh and Blood that prevent these super go wide turns or allowing Runeblades to really get this huge amount of like bonus small incremental effect really wouldn't be as much of a problem as it was pre ice cards existing. But what do you think?
Yeah, I think that Seeds of Agony is extremely good in Chain. Specifically, its synergies with Riftbind and Bounding Demigod are like very, very good. But at its core, it's a non-attack action that says deal 1 damage. And that's just like, the fact that you can play it from Blood Debt maybe is good enough with Chain Bound by Shadow, but who knows what the next Shadow Heroes ways of getting Blood Debt's cards into their banished zone will be. Because if you're like having to draw it and play it, this card is like extremely horrible.
Right.
And I think if you are playing this card from your hand and that's somehow setting it up to be banished, then, or some other effect, I just don't think this card is there on power level outside of how Chain currently uses it.
Well, then, yeah, I think we're spot on about its overall power level then.
All right, and that's all of the cards we have to talk about.
Yeah, this was really fun. I appreciate going through this. I think it really shows just how much Flesh and Blood has shifted over just the past year now since Monarch has came out, and how much talented effects have really adjusted the way we have to evaluate and look at all the talentless cards as well as the talent cards, even when trying to evaluate cards in a vacuum. I think if we were trying to evaluate the top 10 most synergistic cards, or cards that just have the highest power level, bar none, on Magical Christmas Land every turn, the list would look a lot different still, but I don't think it would still be radically different.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of cards that when you're doing the thing that they're asking you to do, they can be quite powerful, and a lot of those cards didn't make my list because it's hard to consistently do the thing, I guess.
Right. It's just not only just looking at a cards in a vacuum. I guess it's looking at cards as, okay, what's their highest upside, as well as what are they doing when they're just being an average card in your deck on an off turn, or when you're just kind of muddling about. I think that really goes a long way in showing how Michael and I look and evaluate cards overall. And I think it would really go a long way for helping you at home or wherever you're listening to this to look about and think about cards in Flesh and Blood. But if there are any cards you think we missed or didn't include, feel free to let us know in the comments. We'd love to hear them. Michael and I are not the end-all be-all authorities on the top 10 cards, believe it or not, especially Michael. He's not even the #1 rated player anymore. So he could have easily forgotten a card. So please let us know. We'd love to hear from you. Anything else before we sign off, though, Michael?
Oh, thanks everybody for listening. And yeah, let us know in the comments if you disagree. If you think Arclight Sentinel should be on our list or whatever other cards, please let us know.
For sure. All right. That's it for us, everybody. Thanks again for listening. And remember, mind your manners. We'll see you next time.